it's that time again, ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's that time of wondering where in the actual F are we going with all of these IPs, these franchises between Marvel and Star Wars and all of these things, in where they're gonna go, and they're certainly not going in the right direction that we all want them to go. I I don't know. Even working 6 years into the film industry, I mean, I'm only a set dresser for the art department. So it's not like I have, exclusive intel that has only transpired through the film industry, but I sort of know I basically know how this sausage is made. And to make anything really happen takes a lot of fucking work. Like a ton of work because just excluding shows for a second, just to make a fucking movie takes at least a year. At least a year. You're investing so much time into writing, developing, pre-production, principal photography, and then editing, and then post-production, and mixing, and sound mixing, and all of these things that require a fucking village to essentially conduct and make whoever's art, the director or the writer's art, basically come to life. Although to be fair, it's basically everyone's in that crew, right? Because if they're not on board or at least passionate about the things that make that story special and why they want to be part of it, does lend to how good a thing can really be. And we've seen this with all sorts of movies and TV and all that, right? Who really dedicate themselves to the craft. And I gotta say, I know a lot of people have jumping off the Star Wars train a long time ago, in a theater far away, essentially, um, and that Star Wars fans are just sort of like sick of it. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm definitely sick of it. Uh, but I do have a few questions. I have a few thoughts about Star Wars. But basically, what I love seeing the most is from all of these projects, from the shows to the movies. I understand that a lot of people want to shit on the production value of most of these things, but you got to understand something, right? These people who are working for anywhere from ILM to the actual production of these Star Wars shows and movies are done with love. They're done with care because people do give a shit about Star Wars. At least the people who are on the crew, they really give a shit about Star Wars. They want to make sure that they're making something that is special, that reminds them of what makes Star Wars special. It all shows for the most part. A lot of times you see a lot of volume shit, and then there's some effects that kind of take you out of it and whatnot. But for the most part, this is all done with love. So when I am about to talk about the Acolyte, it's not because I think that everything, and I saw this with a lot of YouTubers who feel like everything from the production to the writing to everything just all sucks. I don't know if it all sucks. I don't think it all sucks. The writing, I mean, we could talk about the writing in a minute, but like the amount of time and the amount of patience that you have to make a project come to life like this, and I can only assume for a TV show, it's probably longer than a year than what a feature could be. But not all features take a year, right? They take like anywhere from a year to 10 years. It's a whole fucking process that can be a nightmare for a lot, but a journey nonetheless for most. And I do think that in times in times like these, where we're uncertain about our own government, we're uncertain about the world's governments, and the rise of right wing ideology in the EU, and of course like the all the stuff that we see on the news here in America. Like there's a lot going on. And so to have a show essentially depict the Sith and to paint the Jedi in a different light, maybe a negative light, was absolutely going to be refreshing when the Acolyte was announced. Because when it was announced, what was it, 3 years ago? Right? 2 years ago? I don't know. I lost track of time. I had the thought of, oh, we're going to go to the Old Republic, but only seeing the perspective of the Sith. I think that's metal as fuck. I think that's sick. And we may still get that, right? But so far in the show, in the Acolyte, it kind of has proven everything but, except for maybe except for episode 3, which I'm definitely going to get into. So, getting into the first episode of the Acolyte, I wasn't sure how I felt, because how it opened was essentially this Sith assassin who is just on a Kill Bill vision quest, essentially, of killing all of these masters, these Jedi masters, who have wronged her in the past. And so she wants to seek revenge. Great. I'm down for this. Then you get Jedi Master Trinity, who is, I'm excited to just see do some insane kung fu shit, which I was very happy about. The action pieces are, in my opinion, they're better than the last, I would say, 2 or 3 shows, from Book of Boba to Ahsoka. Like, I feel like a lot of those action sequences were left to be desired. And that's not to say that it completely undermined the quality of these said action sequences. Some are really good, some are better than others for sure, but the Acolyte really proved that it was going to do its due diligence to make sure that the action mattered, and that you even see the characters develop through these actions and whatnot, from Master Saul, from May, and even Osha, and a lot of these Jedi, right? So with episode 1, we see her fight Jedi Master Trinity. Her name's Indara. And she essentially takes her down with a single knife, like a throwing knife, which is, I don't know, like considering how many shows there are that just show that, oh, when you get stabbed by a lightsaber, you can probably live, for sure, which makes no fucking sense. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So we're just kind of left on our own regard as to thinking, okay, so people can just live from getting stabbed by a lightsaber, and then we see a throwing knife just, point blank range in Master Trinity's chest, and then she falls and then she perishes. I mean, she could still be very well alive, but again, it would still be one of those things where you're like, okay, so essentially, like, anybody who is murked have like a 40 to 90% chance of surviving that. Rest in peace, Qui-Gon Jinn. Justice for Qui-Gon. You know what I mean? Jesus Christ, that boy got stabbed and he was immediately perished. We only got 2.5 hours worth of Qui-Gon Jinn. We didn't see shit from him since, which sucked. Nobody wanted to deal with that. That was kind of like, the whole point of just seeing Anakin be trained by Qui-Gon Jinn. That would have been fucking sick, right? Well, it took a turn for the worse, and Obi-Wan has to step up. which in my opinion it was a correct and good way of beginning Anakin's relationship with Obi-Wan. And I thought it was brilliant. So going back to episode 1, we see that she is tracking down all these Jedi Masters. And then we cut to another woman who looks exactly like the Sith assassin, who apparently is the twin sister of May. Her name's Osha. And I at first was confused, but then it sort of made sense that it is just this twin who is now framed for murdering Jedi, even though I'm sure the Jedi would probably understand that May has done things that would be impossible in the jurisdiction of Osha, because Osha is in a completely different galaxy. She's a mechanic, essentially, working on ships or outside of ships, putting out fires that combust in space. Which, again, I'm not hung up on. I know a lot of people were, because, I mean, I think, it was episode 3 or 2, maybe, when R2-D2 was out there fixing a ship, and that shit caught on fire, and yet he was able to whatever. It doesn't matter, right? The point is that this twin sister is now part of an investigation who was in the Jedi, but I guess was kicked out for a number of reasons we still don't know, and she is now part of this, because sure, fair enough that it's her sister, so she cares, but also she's a civilian. These Jedi are basically cops. Why would you have a civilian join the cops to investigate your missing sister? That's the cop's job. So whatever, So we get to Osha, and she is with her old master, Master Saul, and they go on this quest to find her twin sister, right? Along with other Jedi who are just, they just whatever. They come and go. Although there is one Jedi, I think his name is Yord. What I found interesting was, I can't remember if it was episode 1 or 2, so I'm going to be blending this shit together. But what I was excited for was to see a Jedi essentially use a power that would work against the code of the Jedi. And I felt like it did. And nobody really talked about that, because he definitely used a Jedi mind trick on one of the Trade Federation people in episode 1. And I mean, essentially, he manipulated, right? So he used a Jedi mind trick on them to essentially gain information, when that's not really what Jedi do. I mean, I don't think that's what Jedi do, but I could be wrong. I don't know. It's just that feels like a little bit crossing boundaries there. And then you get another scene, I think maybe the next episode, where you see Master Saul, who is, a Jedi Master who understands, the capabilities of the Force and the power that is held within, uses that same power on another person to essentially gain information the same way Yord did, but did it in a way that the circumstances made sense, because the guy who was trying to get information from, he was just kind of all over the place, because he just lost his fucking mind from a parasite that was sucking his face when Osha was a prisoner, when they thought that Osha was the killer, even though it was her twin sister. So Master Saul uses this Jedi mind trick on him to just get his story straight. And he got the story straight, said everything that happened, that went down, verbatim. And that was, in my opinion, a phenomenal use of the Force, right? That I mean, I don't know about phenomenal, but it's an appropriate way to use the Force. So when that happens, we now see them go on this quest to find the other Jedi Master, who the Sith assassin May is hunting down. So they go to this planet, and they devise this three-head scheme of, you know, tracking down May and watching over this local Jedi temple that is poorly guarded, by the way, because May was able to infiltrate that Jedi temple like twice in a row, and got away scot free every time, which is again very interesting. So I think how it ended was that Jedi Master that May is hunting down was given a vial of poison and essentially killed himself because of the events that took place when May and Osha were little. You know, this horrible thing that happened, this atrocity that happened, right? So we see him take this poison, and the whole point of May, I guess, doing this is to fulfill her trials to become a Sith. Because this Sith Lord figure dude, we don't know who this or girl, we don't know. Essentially was talking about how if one wants to become a Sith, they need to kill Jedi, but not with a weapon, because using a weapon would be useless against the Jedi. Although the 2 times that she did kill these Jedi Masters were all used by weapons. Sure, you can argue that Master Torben, the second Jedi Master who was given the poison, yeah, I guess you can say that he willfully killed or unalived himself. I know YouTube is crazy about that. So it's just it was confusing because she used weapons. She essentially used weapons. And whatever, you know, it's just like okay, there's been a few pitfalls here, but let's just carry on, right? So episode 3 was probably the most controversial, and I haven't seen episode 3 until yesterday. Yesterday, early in the morning, and I just needed time to just wrap my head around it, to just like gestate it, to just really understand the show and what it had to offer so far. And then of course I opened up YouTube, and my algorithm was just lit up by other YouTubers who were very talented, including Star Wars Theory, who essentially broke it all down as to why this is the most controversial episode. Okay, so we see the beginning childhood of May and Osha, and they are part of this witch coven raised by 2 moms. We love we very powerful witches. We love woke queens, and they somehow willed twins into conception to a witch carrying these children, gave birth to these children with no father to procreate with, just by use of the Force, right? Now, if that sounds familiar, it is, because Anakin was the chosen one, and he was willed by birth because of Darth Plagueis wanted to create a powerful Jedi, or I guess a powerful Sith, all on his own, you know, for the benefit of the dark side. Now, this was part of like books years ago, right? And Darth Plagueis is a phenomenal book. If y'all haven't read that, one of my favorites. James Lucerno really fucking nailed it. So he explained that, and that is kind of what triggered Anakin to be born, is that he was supposed to be the chosen one, you know, to bring balance to the Force and whatnot. The prophecy foretold. So Here's my thing. It's not the fact that you it's not the fact that having these twins is completely counterproductive to Star Wars overall, right? Because we haven't seen the rest of the season. So we don't know how this will was made. We don't know how this kind of came to be, because it is their own, the witches, this is their own interpretation of the Force. The Force, with all due respect, is not just one-sided to the Jedi. It's not just a thing that is only defined by the Jedi and word is God and nothing else can define it. So to have witches essentially come in and challenge that, I feel is a refreshing take on what we learned to be the Force. That's not to take away the Chosen One. That's not to take away Anakin. That's not to take away the Force and how we understand it. Because there's thousands of species, thousands of planets in the galaxy. It's impossible to just have that one definition and everybody just has to follow that, right? So it's a little bit silly to think that this is all just going to be one-sided. So the witches kind of having their own definition of the Force by way of the thread, and you pull it and it manifests your destiny. Although that kind of contradicts itself, because the witches also said that the Force is wielded by some who use it as a weapon, but yet they do as well, technically. Even though, yeah, it is by defense. Jedi use it by defense, but again, that makes the story interesting. You have another set of characters who essentially look down on the Jedi's depiction of the Force, but it doesn't necessarily complement or accommodate the Sith's way of using the Force, because they also use it for bad. So if there is two polarizing effects of the Jedi with the Sith, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer that the witches are going to fall somewhere in between this, right? And I'm not going to get into the whole woke thing, because I feel like that's so weird that people still bring this up, that it is two moms who were raising this child or children who are twins, that completely goes against the grain of Star Wars as a whole. I don't think it goes against the grain. It's just the Acolyte, what we have to see it as is a complete branch off of the Skywalker saga that has nothing to do with the Skywalker saga, in fact. So with that came a very interesting prospect of how you are going to have these pseudo Force users to essentially have their own journey with how they wield it, how they use it. And these twins were part of this coven who are going through an ascension, I guess, like an inauguration of them coming into the coven. It's still kind of a little bit blurry, to be honest with you. And yeah, it's a little goofy. It's fine. I feel like there's so much goofy shit that happens in Star Wars. We sort of forgive all that shit, but then once we see something like this, then all of a sudden it's like we're the Manchurian Candidate, and we're all like activated to hate something because it's not exactly the way that we all depict Star Wars to only be this binary thing, right? Just one-to-one thing, even though we did get a one-to-one thing from Force Awakens and somewhat of the sequel trilogy. Fans did not like it, and rightfully so, because it's just repeating the same shit, different skin, although they call it Episode 7, 8, and 9, when you could just probably remake the fucking thing, the whole entire, like Star Wars, just remake Star Wars, and just make it a retelling of the same story that we all know and love. that could probably work. I know a lot of people would freak out about that, but at the same time, it's like these stories are special for a reason, and just because like we have all these remakes of these other movies like Poltergeist or Evil Dead, which fucking ruled, that Star Wars cannot be touched, right? Well, Star Wars have been touched, and they've been touched in all the wrong ways. That sounds horrible, right? That sounds horrible what I just said, but I kind of mean it. Because ever since Disney held on to it, it's almost like as if they were kind of like doing their absolute best to make sure that they can get newer fans, which I don't know if it creates newer fans. Although, like, if it does, that's great. I'm happy for it. I felt like there was probably more fans created by way of Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2, or Andor, right? Season 1. I feel like if you were going to get anybody involved with Star Wars, that would probably be a cool place to start off with, right? It would be an interesting place to start off with. So, that being said, I think The Acolyte is, I feel like it's now kind of getting interesting, and I think I'm going to stick around with this show for like maybe a couple more episodes, unless it just like skyrockets, or not skyrocket, but essentially bombs down completely. Although I know a lot of people are already, jumping ship as of episode 3. I feel like if you were already jumping ship, you probably should have jumped ship, back in Ahsoka, or back in Book of Boba Fett, or even back with the sequel trilogy. Like, I don't know what else to tell you other than that, like, these films in the franchise itself holds no real accountability to Disney and the filmmakers involved, because I think that there is a set of rules that you're supposed to follow, like any other IP, because it's the IP. It's what made it special. So if you're going to have an IP that's going to completely dismantle itself through an entire saga of 9 movies, well, then you just completely defeated the purpose of the franchise itself. So I don't know. I don't know where Star Wars can go from here. I really don't. I feel like Star Wars had kind of overdone its welcome. I don't mind the shows. I, in fact, don't even mind Mandalorian. But do we need a Boba Fett show? I mean, like, I'm a fucking Fett fan. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of why I tuned into Disney Plus. And then when I watched it, it was not that good. It was really bad. It was in fact one of the worst ones that I've seen. It was like trying to be Godfather, but directed by Robert Rodriguez. And I'm a big Robert Rodriguez fan. I mean, I live in Austin, for Christ's sakes. I think his movies are phenomenal. From Dusk Till Dawn is still one of those movies that I never explain to people who never seen the film. And I'm like, I'm just going to put this movie on, and you're just going to experience it. And if you've never seen it, do not look at any synopsis. Just go in it blind, because it is a roller coaster of a movie, and I fucking love it. George Clooney's, and you get your Quentin Tarantino. That's right, Quentin Tarantino. He acts somewhat, So I feel like his movies do rule. But then when it came to, Book of Boba Fett, I just didn't know what the fuck happened. I didn't know what the fuck happened. It was just, it was crazy. So I feel like I'm overstaying my welcome as a Star Wars fan, for sure, just because like I was very interested in the Acolyte. Like Acolyte was one of the shows that I was most interested in, even more so than Andor, when all these shows were announced. Because I don't know, man. Like I'm a huge fan of Knights of the Old Republic. I'm excited to see a Republic show, Old Republic show that is depicted through the Sith. I thought it couldn't be more badass. I thought it would be fucking rad, for sure. And I'm still on board with that. To be honest with you, I'm still very very much on board with it, and we'll see how Ahsoka or Acolyte does, because I think that there is room to tell these stories. There is room to have, witches essentially depict their own version of, the Force, as much as there is room to have twins be willed by the Force. But how we got there, was it earned? Did it feel like it fits narratively? And if it doesn't, then why is it like kind of shoehorned? Why is it kind of phoned in? And maybe all these questions are going to be answered through the season. But for how many people hated episode 3, I honestly didn't mind it. I, in fact, did not like the first 2 episodes. Just because the first 2 episodes, I'm like, okay, so the next scene, we're going to have the Sith's point of view. Okay, never mind. Episode 2, we're going to see the Sith's point of view. Okay, never mind. We're just going to cruise around with the Jedi, being awesome and rad, I guess, and Master Saul, the actor who plays Master Saul, is fucking genius, super well talented. And that's going back to people who give a shit about Star Wars. You can tell some people who really gave a shit about Star Wars. I'm not saying that all of them didn't. I'm just saying that you see the passion in which people are excited to be part of a Star Wars story that they can be proud of themselves. I'm curious about what those crew members think of the show or any of the shows they've worked on. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how far a show like The Acolyte can really go, when I feel like all it's kind of doing is just trying to push like controversial ideas for the sake of controversy. And I don't know if that works, because you can make something controversial. I mean, George Lucas made prequels kind of controversial, to be honest with you. I mean, should Jar Jar Binks, need I say more? Good God, So I feel like there is room to challenge the Jedi and to make the Jedi look like they are liars. They are not peacekeepers, or they are peacekeepers, but they only uphold the law by which the Republic sees best. So there's political corruption. There's all these things that can really make the Jedi look really bad. And I watched a podcast, shout out to Christian Harloff podcast, or the Big Thing podcast. But one of the guests said that, like, I wish that I see the Jedi as cool again. And I'm like, well, Jedi have always been cool. That's the thing. It's like the Jedi have always been cool, even from the prequels, right? Although the prequels were kind of ass movies, for some of them, for the most part, they were depicted pretty fucking sick, And I have a way bigger appreciation of the prequels, I guess by way of the new shit by Disney. But all in all, I think that the depiction of the Jedi have just been recycled over and over and over again, including like, characters who were on the dark side, who were on the evil side, and then flip by the end of the season or movie or what have you. I'm sick of that story beat. I'm just gonna say it right now. I really hate that story beat. And what could really save Acolyte a lot and I'm crossing my fingers they do this. It's kind of a theory that May stays in the dark side, just stays the way that she is, but somehow gets her sister seeing her way, right? Because how episode 3 kind of turned out was that May locked Osha into a room because she wants to go through the Jedi trials, and May was like, "No fucking way, you're not doing that. And if you are, I'm gonna fucking kill you," which is kind of a leap. I don't know if I would tell my sibling that I would kill them. I never really said that shit, let alone I never been a twin. Although I do have an older sibling who I would never fucking say that I would kill them. Like that's one, an insane reach, and two, I just feel like is just a little too much. And so May locks her in a room and lights the fucking room on fire, but then somehow the entire coven, which is built inside of a mountain, essentially combusts, right? And I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that we get an explanation, or at least through the eyes of May, because May kind of went missing at some point, because she saw her sister in this like bay sort of like catwalk thing, and then a huge buttress just kind of come crashing down, and May falls down, and Osha is about to fall down, but then at the last second, Master Saul saved her. So, which is kind of interesting to save one but not another, even though you clearly probably see that person. Or no, I'm pretty sure Master Saul saw May essentially fall, but did nothing about it, which, again, I'm assuming we're going to have some sort of explanation. But I really am sick of these shows sort of cliffhanging more than they should. Like that's a huge problem that I have, more so than the witch stuff and all that, right? It's just like how the story is kind of laid out is such a fuckery way. It feels like it's hard to keep track. It feels like there's not enough to really gain. Although it is interesting, there's just not really much to look forward to, right? And at a certain point, I'm sure fans with other shows, not just this one, felt like it's turning into homework because you just don't know what the fuck is going on until you reach to the end of the season. And then once you get to the end of the season, most of the time, those questions aren't even fucking answered. Or maybe some are answered, like the obvious ones should be answered, but then it moves on to other shit that you're like, well, okay, now I have even more fucking questions. What is going on? What's happening? And like when you're telling a story for any TV show, there's arcs. There's acts with some of these TV shows. Not all. There's some that are more serialized than the others. But I just feel like for the most part, it should follow the basic principles of a 3-act structure, however it may be, And so, yeah, I just don't know. I don't know where we go. Star Wars is such a powerful franchise and such a powerful storytelling, innovative machine that it felt like, I don't know, the last 5 years were just not, or even, the last 10 years, since Lucas went to Disney, I just felt like there wasn't really much to really cheer for. And I still have hope in a way, but I don't know. I don't know. I maybe it is just the time of fans just needing to move on. But it's hard for me to do that because I grew up with Star Wars. That's kind of the reason why I got into filmmaking. And of course other films really got me into filmmaking, but Star Wars was one of the first that broadened my horizons in terms of storytelling, that could be magical yet feel grounded enough that I can relate to it and my sibling can relate to it, and she's the one who actually got me into the whole thing in the first place. And it was something that we cherish. And then I find other Star Wars fans who feel the same way, or at least have their own interpretation of Star Wars. And I love that. There's a bond with this community, but also there's a general fucking utter hatred for the Star Wars shit that's been happening, at least as of late. So is Star Wars completely dead? I don't know. I do think Star Wars can redeem themselves if they just take their time and really ensure that they get people behind who give a shit about the show, but also can really look at themselves in the mirror and go, is this a story that I want to tell and be respectful from the IP, or do I want to tell my own story? And maybe, just maybe, this story is not for me, or at least this franchise is just not for me because I want to tell my own thing, which is completely valid and it's very fair. But it's definitely unfair to shove a somewhat of a half-baked script or a half-baked idea. And I'm not saying this in particular to Acolyte. I'm saying this applying to all of the projects. And that is, if you have a half-baked idea, instead of just gunning for it and say, fuck it, Disney wants us to release this in 2 years from now, we don't have time to fucking dick around about it and think about it. It's more so like, you gotta make sure you're telling the story right. You gotta make sure that the beats work. You gotta make sure that the atmosphere works, camera angles work, storyboards work, costume works, makeup works. Different things, different elements that really make Star Wars special. It doesn't need to be made every 6 months and be shoved in our faces, right? Just like with Marvel. It's okay to take a break and it's okay to take some time, but that's just not the business model of Disney. So whether we like it or not, Disney's just going to keep pumping more stuff out as long as people are going to be watching it. And I feel like sooner or later, people are going to vote with their wallets and they're going to straight up be like, no, fuck this. We don't want to watch this anymore. Yeah, I guess that's that. I mean, I wish there's more I can say about this, but other than that, I think I said everything I needed to say. So I still love Star Wars. I still am a fan of Star Wars. Am I a fan of this newer generation of Star Wars? I mean, Andor was sick. Mando season 1 and 2 were phenomenal. Star Wars Visions was great. Tales of the Jedi was great. Tales of the Empire I thought was phenomenal. Which again was like one of those things where I'm like, okay, if we're going to have Tales of the Empire and it's told in these arcs, no way that Acolyte wouldn't at least, take a brush stroke from this show and apply it to Acolyte. It certainly did not. It certainly is kind of paddling its own canoe, which I applaud, but at a certain point, the IP should remain the IP. Like, I think that would be kind of crazy for like Game of Thrones or like a House of the Dragon, or like I spin off a show from Game of Thrones, and I'm like, okay, I think the dragons are gonna have a dragon-sized guitar, and every time they emit fire or one of those people say Dracarys, you just see a dragon just shredding on the guitar with like a sick like Eddie Van Halen guitar solo and shit every time it breathes fire. You know what I mean? I would imagine 95% of Game of Thrones fans would probably want to throw me into the stratosphere. I hope you're picking up what I'm laying down. Basically, it's like if you have the IP depict and understood in a way that has always been depicted and understood, instead of just going by controversy, go by challenge. Go by way of let's see what the breaking point of some of these characters are who are representations of the Jedi, of the Sith, of witches, of the Night Sisters, of any of these things that can challenge the Force, that can really bring an interesting perspective into what makes the Force so ethereal and so interesting and vague, but also not really, because how it's defined by old man Ben Kenobi, is a force field that surrounds us, penetrates us, and embodies all. Like that's not really like a tangible hardline definition. It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of a thing that that is understood by all, or it's acknowledged by all, but maybe not understood by everyone, right? So we know that it's powerful, and we know that some people are more sensitive to the Force than others. That's all fine and dandy. I feel like that there's plenty of room for that, as much as there's, like I said, plenty of room for depictions of the Force, calling it the thread, or willing a pregnancy of twins, by way of the thread, right, or by way of the Force. There's ways to go about this that would not take away from Anakin's story, and I still don't think it really took away from Anakin's story. So I'm curious as to any fans of Star Wars who feel differently, because it certainly did not feel like that for me. It just felt like, okay, this is kind of a different version of how this is depicted, and I don't know if I'm totally on board with it. Although it is interesting. So what the fuck do I know? You know what I mean? I'm just another dummy with a microphone. So that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to be consistent with these episodes, although it's been kind of a hectic last couple of days. I just enjoy doing this, and I wanted to sit down and talk about it because I have so many thoughts, and I still do. And my thoughts could absolutely fucking change because, next week we could have a banger of an episode of Acolyte, and I could come back here and be like, actually, on second thought, it rules, or it's like, I am out of here. No more. So that's about it. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.